Welcome to the Bay. I'm absolutely thrilled you've docked your build here today because we've got a heavyweight hardware showdown lined up for you. If you're navigating the used market for your 2026 PC upgrades, chances are you've narrowed it down to two insanely popular NVIDIA cards, the RTX 3070 and the beefed-up RTX 3080 12GB model. So today, we're putting these two silicon titans head-to-head in this explainer. We're going to tear down the specs, analyze the real-world frame rates, and figure out exactly which one deserves to be slotted into your motherboard. Now, to make sure we're steering the ship with the absolute best data possible, we're relying on the comprehensive benchmarking and market analysis directly from bestgpusforgaming.com. Think of their data as our navigational chart for today. The used GPU market can be seriously tricky waters to sail, right? And we want to help you avoid any thermal throttling on your wallet by making a perfectly informed decision. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our diagnostic checklist for today's flight plan. First, specs and VRAM bottlenecks. Second, the frame rate showdown. Third, ray tracing and features. Fourth, price versus performance value. And finally, which GPU fits you. Let's get right to it. Section 1. Specs and VRAM bottlenecks, or as I like to think of it, your physical hardware constraints. So before we even touch on frame rates, we really have to look at the physical realities of actually docking these cards into your rig. These are quite literally two completely different beasts when it comes to power delivery. The 3070? Well, it's kind of what we call an efficiency king. It pulls a very manageable 220 watts, super easy to cool, and a total breeze to fit into a compact build without turning your room into a sauna. On the flip side, the 3080 12GB is a heavy, power-hungry powerhouse. It pulls a massive 350 watts. If you're gonna run this card, you absolutely need a solid 750 to 850 watt power supply. You seriously don't want your system failing to post just because you skimmed on the power delivery. But that extra wattage feeds something absolutely crucial, that massive 12GB VRAM buffer. Which actually brings us to a term every single builder needs to understand: bottlenecking. Basically, it's when one specific component restricts the overall maximum performance of your entire system. Now, the 3070 was a legendary card, no doubt, but here in 2026, its 8GB memory buffer is increasingly becoming a pretty major bottleneck for texture quality in modern AAA titles. Games are just getting way bigger and hungrier. That's exactly why the 12GB on the 3080 provides much safer waters. It significantly cuts down on that annoying stutter and texture pop-in when you're cranking those settings all the way up. Moving on to Section 2, the frame rate showdown. Time to boot up the HUD and put these cards through some 1440p gaming stress tests. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer dominance of the RTX 3080 12GB across the board. Just look at Cyberpunk 2077 on high ray tracing settings. The 3070 hits a respectable 60 frames per second. Definitely playable, right? But the 3080, it blasts all the way up to 92 FPS. And in competitive shooters like Warzone, where literally every single frame matters, the 3080 jumps from 135 to a blistering 195 frames per second. It is a complete sweep in every single title tested here. In fact, when you zoom out and average it all at 1440p, the RTX 3080 12GB is operating at a massive 40 to 50% performance premium over the 3070. Let that sink in. That isn't just a marginal little upgrade. That is a completely different tier of gaming. This kind of raw horsepower, combined with much stronger minimum frame rates, is exactly what gets you comfortable just leaving your settings on ultra without sweating about dropping frames during a huge explosion or an intense firefight. All right, Section 3, ray tracing and features. Let's see what happens when the lighting gets really complex. So, raw rasterization, or just standard rendering, is really only half the story. What happens when we turn on all the shiny stuff? Well, this is where the 3080 12GB just completely shows off. It's the Ampere architecture at its absolute peak. While the 3070 is still an amazing, highly efficient upper mid-range card, the 3080 12GB packs a massive 384-bit memory bus. That extra memory bandwidth means it handles heavy ray tracing and genuine 4K gaming like an absolute heavyweight champ. The 3070 is going to hit a brick wall pretty fast at native 4K, forcing you to dial things back. But the 3080? Pair that with NVIDIA's DLS upscaling, and you've got the headroom to actually enjoy next-gen lighting and ultra-high resolutions without turning your game into a slideshow. Next up, Section 4, price versus performance value. So, the crucial point is, how much does all this power actually cost on the 2026 used market? When we break it down to 1440p frames per second per dollar, the value proposition here is incredibly tight. Right now, you can typically grab a used RTX 3070 for around $200. That gives it a value score of 0.63. Meanwhile, the RTX 3080 12GB is sitting right around $280, giving it a score of 0.64. What this tells us is that, hey, both cards offer phenomenal bang for your buck, but the 3080 actually edges out the 3070 in pure value. For just an extra $80, you're literally buying your way out of that 8GB VRAM bottleneck. You're securing a card that's going to comfortably power through the next few years of gaming as an undisputed enthusiast favorite. Finally, Section 5. Which GPU fits you? Let's figure out which hardware you should permanently slot into your setup. We've broken this down into some really specific builder personas straight from the experts at bestgpusforgaming.com. And this brilliantly illustrates who truly benefits from the extra VRAM. If you demand 1440p ultra settings, if you dabble in 4K, or if you consider yourself a ray tracing enthusiast, the RTX 3080 12GB is your clear-cut winner. That extra VRAM is basically non-negotiable for you. But if you're a strict budget buyer on the used market trying to stretch every single dollar, or maybe you're building in a small form factor case that absolutely demands a quiet, efficient setup, the RTX 3070 is still a spectacular harbor to drop your anchor in. So I'm going to leave you with this. Which card is going to power your next rig? Are you leaning toward the hyper-efficient 3070, or are you going all in on the powerhouse 3080 12GB? Just think about your specific needs, your power supply, and of course your budget. For even more detailed benchmarking, data, and to check the latest market prices, make sure you navigate over to bestgpusforgaming.com to help finalize your next build guide. Thanks so much for docking with us today. Until next time, keep it cool and keep building.